Capricorn, stop scrolling. The direction of your life may be changing right now, and you may already be feeling it. August 12th opens a powerful new moon and solar eclipse chapter. And for Capricorn, this energy can feel less like an ending and more like a sudden redirection. Something is shifting, and it may be leading you somewhere you never expected. The feeling that something is about to change. Capricorn, if you've been feeling unusually restless, emotionally distant from your old routine, or strangely certain that something has to change, don't ignore that feeling. Sometimes the first sign of a new chapter isn't excitement, it's discomfort. You begin realizing that the life you once worked so hard to build no longer feels completely aligned with who you're becoming. You may look at the same people, the same responsibilities, the same goals, and suddenly see them differently. Not because anything dramatic happened, just because something in you has quietly shifted. This is where the energy of a new moon becomes symbolic. A new moon represents a reset point, a dark sky before the next cycle begins. And when you combine that symbolism with eclipse energy, the story becomes even more powerful. Eclipse periods are often associated with revelations, closures, beginnings, and unexpected shifts. They tend to compress months of slow realization into a single undeniable moment of clarity. For Capricorn, this can feel especially significant because you're naturally wired to build slowly, carefully, and strategically. You don't usually change direction without a reason. You test things, you plan, you wait until you're sure, but this time, the reason may become impossible to ignore. Maybe it's a conversation that lingers longer than it should. Maybe it's a quiet Tuesday afternoon where you suddenly ask yourself, is this actually what I want? Maybe it's simply exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from working too hard, but from working hard in the wrong direction. Whatever form it takes, trust it. This isn't randomness. This is your own inner compass finally getting loud enough to hear. Why Capricorn feels this energy so deeply. Capricorn is not a sign that enjoys unnecessary chaos. You prefer structure. You want to know where you're going and why you're going there. You like plans that make sense. You like results that can be measured, milestones you can point to, proof that the effort was worth it. But life doesn't always announce its turning points in a logical way. Sometimes a door closes before another one becomes visible. Sometimes a person leaves before you understand why their presence had become a limitation. Sometimes a goal loses its emotional meaning, even though you once wanted it more than anything. And you're left standing there, achievement in hand, wondering why it doesn't feel the way you thought it would. That is why August 12th may feel strange. You could be standing between two versions of yourself. The old version wants certainty. It wants the map, the guarantee, the 5-year plan already laid out. The emerging version wants freedom, space to become something that doesn't have a name yet, and the tension between those two identities can become impossible to ignore. You may feel it as irritability, as tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, as a low hum of something's not right running underneath an otherwise normal day. This isn't necessarily about destroying your life and starting over. It rarely is for a sign like yours. It's about recognizing which direction still deserves your energy and which one you've simply been continuing out of habit. The old direction may no longer fit. One of the strongest messages for Capricorn right now is this: you don't have to keep walking toward a destination simply because you already invested years getting there. Think about that for a moment. How much of your current life exists because you genuinely want it? And how much exists because you once decided it was the responsible thing to do? There is a difference, and it's a difference you've probably been avoiding looking at too closely. Maybe you've been carrying a responsibility that nobody asked you to carry anymore. Maybe you've been trying to prove yourself to people who stopped watching a long time ago. A parent, a former boss, A version of your hometown that doesn't even remember who you used to be. Maybe you've been chasing a version of success that looked impressive from the outside, but never actually gave you peace on the inside. The eclipse portal, symbolically, can represent a moment where those contradictions become visible, where the story you've been telling yourself about why you're doing what you're doing suddenly doesn't hold together the way it used to. And when something becomes visible, Capricorn, you can't unknow it. You can postpone acting on it. You can distract yourself for a while, but you can't go back to not seeing it. Your direction begins changing the moment your truth becomes stronger than your fear, even if nothing on the outside looks different yet. A hidden truth comes to the surface. There may also be something you have avoided admitting to yourself, not to anyone else, to yourself. Maybe you already know what needs to change. Maybe you've known for months quietly, in the part of your mind you don't usually let speak first, but knowing and acting are two completely different things. You might have been waiting for the perfect moment, waiting until you had enough money saved, waiting until everyone understood and approved, waiting until you felt completely confident before you allowed yourself to move. Here's the part that's hard to hear. Confidence doesn't always come before the decision. For most people, and especially for a sign as careful as Capricorn, confidence arrives after you finally make the move, not before. You build it the way you build everything else, one step at a time, through evidence, not through hoping the feeling shows up first. This is why the energy around August 12th can feel like an internal confrontation. Your old fears may become louder right now. The what-ifs, the worst-case scenarios, the voice that says, "You'll regret this." But so may your intuition, that quieter, steadier voice underneath the noise. The important thing is learning the difference between the two. Fear says, stay where everything is familiar, even if familiar has stopped feeling good. Wisdom says something different. Wisdom says, don't stay somewhere simply because it's familiar. Familiar is not the same thing as right. The relationship shift, Capricorn. Your relationships may also become part of this redirection. Some connections may suddenly feel deeper. Conversations that used to stay on the surface start going somewhere real. Others may feel strangely distant, even with people you've known for years. You may notice who genuinely supports your growth and who only feels comfortable with the older version of you. The version that didn't ask for much, that didn't take up space, that fit neatly into the role they were used to. That realization can hurt. It can feel like grief, honestly, even when nothing has technically ended yet. But it can also be liberating. Not everyone is meant to follow you into your next chapter. Some people belong to a season, some belong to a lesson, and a very small number belong to the future you're building. That's not a flaw in you or in them. It's simply how growth works. Not everyone grows at the same pace, in the same direction, at the same time. Don't force a relationship to remain the same simply because you are afraid of losing history. History is not the same thing as alignment. A shared past doesn't guarantee a shared future, and pretending otherwise usually costs you more than it saves you. If someone consistently makes you question your worth, your direction, or your peace, pay attention to that pattern instead of explaining it away. This isn't about suddenly cutting everyone off in one dramatic gesture. It's about becoming more honest, with yourself first, about what your relationships are actually giving you and what they're quietly costing you. Career and money direction. Now let's talk about career, ambition, and money, because this is where Capricorn naturally pays the closest attention. You may be entering a period where your definition of success begins changing. Maybe you've spent years chasing stability, the steady paycheck, the safe title, the predictable path. But now you want meaning too, and you're starting to notice that stability without meaning has a way of feeling hollow after a while. Maybe you want more independence. Maybe you want to build something of your own instead of building someone else's vision. Maybe a new professional opportunity appears unexpectedly, almost out of nowhere, in a way that doesn't fit your careful 5-year plan at all. Or maybe something that once looked like the perfect opportunity suddenly doesn't feel right anymore, even though on paper nothing has changed. Don't automatically interpret that as failure. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes delay is protection, even when it's frustrating in the moment. And sometimes the path that disappears is the path that was never meant to carry you into the next stage of your life. It was only meant to teach you something you needed before moving on. The question isn't simply, how much can I achieve? That question has driven you for years and it's gotten you far. But the deeper question, the one this chapter is asking you to sit with, is, what kind of life am I building through what I achieve? Achievement without a life you actually want to live inside of is just a very well-organized kind of exhaustion, the direction you cannot see. Yet here's the part Capricorn may struggle with most. You may not immediately know where this new direction leads. There's no clear map, no labeled destination, no neat timeline with checkpoints, and that's okay. You don't need the entire map right now. You need the next honest step. That's it. Just the next one. Think about how often you've delayed something because you couldn't guarantee the outcome, because you needed to see the whole staircase before you put your foot on the first stair. But life rarely gives guarantees, Capricorn. Not to you, not to anyone. The people who move forward aren't the ones who got a guarantee. They're the ones who decided the not knowing wasn't going to be the thing that stopped them. The next chapter may begin with something incredibly small. A conversation you've been avoiding, an application you've been sitting on, a decision you keep postponing, a boundary you finally set with someone, a new idea you write down instead of dismissing, a change in your daily routine that seems minor but shifts something underneath it. That small action can become the first domino. You don't need to force the entire future into existence today. You need to stop blocking the future by constantly returning to the past, replaying old conversations, old decisions, old versions of yourself that already served their purpose and can be set down now. What the eclipse is asking you to release. If this new moon represents a symbolic reset, then ask yourself what you are actually ready to stop carrying. Is it guilt over a decision you made years ago with the information you had at the time? Is it resentment towards someone who never apologized and probably never will? Is it the need to be understood by everyone, even people who are never going to make the effort to understand you? Is it perfectionism? The belief that if you just get it exactly right, you'll finally be allowed to rest? Is it an outdated identity, a role you played so well for so long that people forgot to ask if you still wanted to play it? Capricorn, you have a powerful ability to endure. It's one of your defining strengths. You can carry weight for a long time without complaint, without asking for help, without letting anyone see the strain. But endurance is not always the same thing as strength. Sometimes strength is knowing when enough is enough. Sometimes strength looks like putting something down instead of picking up one more thing. You don't have to keep suffering just because you've already survived so much. Survival isn't a debt you owe to your own history. You don't have to keep proving that you're strong. The proof already exists in everything you've already carried this far. You can choose peace instead. You can choose a new standard for what your life is allowed to feel like. You can choose to build something that doesn't require you to constantly abandon yourself in order to keep it standing. 3 signs. Your direction is changing. There are 3 signs I want you to watch for, Capricorn, because they tend to show up quietly, and it's easy to miss them or explain them away. First, your priorities suddenly change. Things that used to consume your attention, a title, a comparison, a goal you inherited rather than chose, no longer feel important the way they used to. You notice the shift almost by accident, in the middle of an ordinary day. Second, you're becoming more protective of your time. You realize that every yes costs something, whether you admit it in the moment or not, and you don't want to spend your limited energy everywhere anymore. You start saying no to things you would have automatically said yes to a year ago, and it doesn't feel selfish, it feels like relief. Third, you're becoming less afraid of disappointing people. This is huge for Capricorn, maybe the most significant of the 3, because so much of your life has been built around being reliable, being the one who doesn't let anyone down. When you stop living according to everyone else's expectations, your real direction becomes so much easier to recognize because it was never actually hidden. It was just buried underneath everyone else's opinions about what you should want. If you've experienced these 3 signs recently, don't immediately assume something is wrong with you. It may simply mean your internal compass is recalibrating, adjusting itself to point towards something that's actually yours. The new version of Capricorn. The Capricorn coming out of this chapter may not be the same Capricorn who entered it. You may become quieter but more confident, less interested in narrating your plans to everyone, more interested in simply living them, more selective but less lonely, because the people who remain are the ones who are actually meant to be there. More ambitious but less desperate to prove yourself, because the proving was always aimed at people who were never going to be satisfied anyway. You may stop chasing recognition and start chasing fulfillment instead. And that is a major transformation, even if it doesn't look like one from the outside. Real growth doesn't always announce itself dramatically. Sometimes it looks like finally sleeping peacefully through the night. Sometimes it looks like saying no without spending 20 minutes explaining and justifying yourself afterward. Sometimes it looks like walking away from something you once begged to keep and feeling lighter instead of devastated. The new version of you doesn't need to announce itself with a big declaration. It doesn't need permission or applause. It simply makes different choices, quietly, one at a time, and lets the pattern speak for itself over months instead of moments. Your new direction begins with one decision. So what should you actually do with this energy, Capricorn? Don't panic. Don't make reckless decisions simply because you're feeling emotional right now. That's not what this chapter is asking of you. Instead, become intentional. Slow down enough to actually choose rather than just reacting. Ask yourself one powerful question. If I were no longer afraid of disappointing anyone, what direction would I choose? Sit with that question. Don't rush the answer. Let it sit uncomfortably for a while if it needs to. Then ask another one. What am I continuing only because I'm afraid of what happens if I let it go? Not because you want it, not because it serves you, just because letting go feels riskier than staying. These 2 questions can reveal more about your real direction than any prediction ever could. The purpose of a symbolic cosmic reset isn't to hand you a script for exactly what will happen next. It's to help you become conscious of what you're already experiencing underneath the surface of your everyday life. Your direction changes the moment your choices change, not before, and not because of anything external. It starts here. The message Capricorn needs to hear. Capricorn, you are not behind. You are not too late. You are not failing simply because your original plan is changing shape. Sometimes the most important achievement of a person's life is realizing that the old definition of success no longer belongs to them, and having the honesty to admit that out loud, even just to themselves. August 12th can be treated as a symbolic checkpoint. A moment to pause, reflect, release what's no longer yours to carry, and choose again with clearer eyes. You don't need to know every detail of the road ahead of you. You only need enough courage to take the next step that feels honest, even if it's small, even if no one else understands it yet. Let the old direction become a lesson instead of a prison you keep sentencing yourself to. Let the uncertainty become space instead of fear. And let this new chapter begin without demanding that you already know how the story ends. You never needed the ending. You only ever needed the next true step. Capricorn, if this message found you at exactly the right moment, take it as your reminder to trust your growth. Comment below, I am ready for my new direction. Writing those words is a simple way to declare that you're no longer holding on to a path that has already expired. If this reading resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. We're continuing to explore the shifts unfolding around you in the chapters ahead. And remember, Your life does not have to look the way you planned for it to become everything you hoped it could be. Capricorn, your next chapter isn't asking you to become someone else. It's asking you to finally become more fully yourself.